Hello everyone and welcome to Slash Film Daily for July 31st, 2018. On today's episode, we'll discuss the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor, Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And Senior Writer, Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
Okay, we got a bunch of news to try to go over in this 30-minute period, so let's just jump into it, and let's start off first with Fox, who is again rebooting 24, but I guess this is going to be the Jack Bauer origin story that we don't need? Brad, tell us about it.
Yeah, pretty much. We heard back in May at the Upfronts presentation for Fox that they were considering two possible options for reviving 24 in a new way. One of them was this much different legal thriller idea where a female lawyer has to uncover this conspiracy in a limited amount of time, presumably 24 hours if they stick to the real-time formula of the original series. And then there was another one that they didn't detail, and that's what this one is, which is a Jack Bauer origin story that would detail what the character was up to before the events of the first season of the show. This is so weird for a number of reasons, because first of all, 24, much like Die Hard, is what made Jack Bauer Jack Bauer. He was a good agent before. He had gone out on some operations, including one that is referenced as the catalyst for what the terrorists are doing and why they kidnap his wife and daughter in the first season. But in the way that Die Hard turns John McClane into John McClane, who was just a regular cop before the events of that night, the whole thing with Jack Bauer is that he becomes Jack Bauer because he keeps getting berated and more and more unhinged by these constant terrorist attacks and events that keep coming through CTU. So the fact that they're trying to turn this into a thing like Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit and showing his life before he was this star CTU agent just seems a little bit ridiculous. And I'm not even sure that anyone is all that interested in a 24 following Jack Bauer when Kiefer Sutherland isn't playing Jack Bauer. 24 Legacy they tried out by having a whole new lead and continuing the story of CTU, but obviously it didn't work out well enough for them to do a second season. That was always meant to be a limited series, but they also
took out the real time constraint, which was the
exactly, and that was definitely a big selling point for the series because it was interesting to see how they were able to fit it into a 24-hour period. But it did also mean that there were plenty of filler episodes because people had to get from one place to another and they had to account for time. I don't know. Fox is clearly desperate to keep 24 alive. I don't think this is the way to do it. I would much rather them turn 24 into some kind of anthology series where that follows maybe different characters and different scenarios where the real-time equation is used in a clever way.
No, I like the other idea they have with the kind of 24-hour lawyer case drama. I feel like using what you said is correct. Using the idea of the show and not it being about the action hero Jack Bauer would be what would get me to watch another 24 series. I know Fox also was considering at one time rebooting Die Hard. Without, Bruce Willis, I think Boom Studios came out with this Die Hard Year One, showing the early days of John McClane.
They're also supposed to be making a Die Hard prequel, or at least there was one in the works. So I don't know. This sounds a bit like that to me. I just don't know if I care about Jack Bauer before.
Brad, you mentioned that people might not care about this because it's early Jack Bauer and Kiefer Sutherland might not be playing him. If Kiefer Sutherland were to return in a digitally de-aged form, would that interest you? Would that make you want to watch this?
I mean, I just don't think it's possible because that kind of special effects work is very expensive and
it works in Marvel movies, but Marvel movies have lots of money.
There's no way he could star in the series, and they would de-age him for every episode of the season. That would just be too expensive and probably not worth it. I almost wish Kiefer Sutherland had a son who sounded and looked a lot like him, and then that would be interesting if he played young Jack Bauer, or even Jack Bauer's a son that we didn't know we had, or something like that.
Yeah, but even then, I don't think the son would capture those mannerisms, when Jack Bauer or Keith Sutherland is, screaming at someone,
or whenever he says "damn it."
Yes, I mean, I don't know. I think Fox needs to give up on this rebooting 24, but we'll see. I'm interested in that the lawyer take on this whole thing. But let's move on to MoviePass, because this was the big news over the weekend. And Ben, you wrote like a huge article on the site explaining all the events that have happened leading up to this weekend and this week. I know it's a lot to parse, but could you, give us the Cliff Notes version for the podcast?
I will do my best, and I apologize to anybody who's sick of us talking about MoviePass, but there's a lot going on here.
Well,
so
you know what? We're going to be done talking about MoviePass pretty soon, it seems.
Well, maybe. Yeah, we'll get to that at the end. So MoviePass ran out of money last week. I think we already talked about that on the podcast. They got a $5 million loan to stay up and running, but somehow things seem to have gotten worse for them in that time. That happened like last Thursday night, and since then it's just been nightmare central for them. So basically they decided to lock their subscribers out of seeing Mission Impossible Fallout in a traditional, if you were to use the app in a normal way to walk up, check in while you're there. Basically, you could only see the movie using the e-ticket partner theaters that partnered with MoviePass to offer e-ticketing, and that is a drastically smaller amount of theaters across the country. So MoviePass released a statement on their website, and I've taken a couple excerpts from that. You can check this out in the article at /film. But basically they said, and this was late last week again, they said, as we've shared with you before, rather than raise the price of the subscription, we've decided to enable all of you to have the choice between high value, with the ability to see up to one movie a day, at a low cost, $9.95, versus the flexibility to see whichever movie you want, wherever and whenever you want to see it. In other words, you can choose to see a movie in high demand on opening weekend for a small additional surcharge, or wait to see a popular movie a bit later in its theatrical run at no additional cost. So that was their statement just a couple of days ago. I mean, that statement in and of itself is sort of ridiculous, because they also go on to say that basically the customers, they're putting the burden on the customers to reach out on Twitter to movie studios and theaters in their area to try to work with MoviePass to make these things available, as if it's our job as consumers to do the legwork of the company for them. So I don't really understand where they're coming from there. They also issued a statement apologizing to users for having check-in problems, basically saying that all e-ticketing remained functional over the weekend.
Yeah, because over the weekend, all the movie theaters in LA, except for the one movie theater that had e-ticketing, you couldn't see any movies. Like, it totally went out.
Yeah. So, and Mission Impossible Fallout just came out this past weekend. Obviously, a lot of people out there who are MoviePass subscribers wanted to go see this movie, but they couldn't. And Peter, you theorized on Twitter, you were wondering how much effect that might have on the opening weekend box office.
Yep, because theoretically, there are over 3 million MoviePass subscribers, and if each one of those wanted to go see Fallout and bring, their significant other or a group of friends, that could, add up to, what did I theorize? $30-40 million, $50 million loss for that movie at the box office.
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, that's like the grand, that's on
the high end for sure. But yeah, like I think Film School Rejects had an article that basically said that despite the fact that Mission Impossible Fallout opened with the highest financial opening weekend of the series so far, it also means that I guess it also is like the fewest number of actual human beings went to go see it. And I think, it's hard to draw a one-to-one comparison with how much MoviePass subscribers make up of the larger movie-going audience, and whether this outage or I guess removal of Fallout from MoviePass's service, or most of its services, whether that contributed to this, but it sort of seems like it did. So, that's one thing that's going on. Also, we reached out to MoviePass to try to get some answers to this, by the way, and they have not responded to our request for comment. So if they do, maybe we'll talk about what they say on an upcoming episode of the show. But according to Business Insider, Mitch Lowe, who's the CEO of MoviePass, told employees at an all-hands meeting yesterday that the app would not make upcoming releases The Meg and Christopher Robin, the next two major releases hitting theaters in the next 2 weeks, available to its subscribers. And he also implied that the practice of not offering tickets to major movies would continue for the foreseeable future. So this is not a one-time temporary thing while they sort of scramble to recover from the events of last week. This seems like it's going to be their official policy moving forward, that a lot of these major movies, unless they are willing to play ball with MoviePass and whatever capacity they decide, that these movies meet that threshold, then they're not going to be available for MoviePass subscribers to see. And that's not exactly a vote of confidence that you want to hear if you're a subscriber.
I'm guessing. I don't know any information, but I'm guessing behind the scenes it's totally what we've speculated in the past, that they're hoping movie studios will advertise on their platform to allow their users to go see their big movie on opening weekend.
Right, yeah, and they're basically like enlisting their own customer base to try to work the ground game and reach out to the studios to convince them to play ball in that way, which is kind of crazy. But also, in addition to all of this, their stock has dropped again. So Helios and Matheson Analytics, which is the parent company of MoviePass, their stock dropped 60% yesterday and closed at 80 cents per share. And this article at Variety says that in October of last year, the share was at $32.90, and it is at 80 cents as of yesterday. And I think it's actually down to 79 cents as of today. So that's pretty awful. In addition to all of that, they have basically not been providing reimbursements to any of their customers because of or at least to several of their customers, because of the outages that they've been having. And then today, MoviePass announced that they are basically trying to save themselves by raising the prices. So that statement that I read from the CEO, which was, again, just issued a couple days ago about how they're not raising the prices, they say that now they are going to raise the price from $9.99 a month to $14.95 a month over the next 30 days and limit access to nearly all Hollywood blockbusters within their first 2 weeks of release. So
wait a second, Ben. So they're raising prices yet giving us less and expecting us to be happy about it?
Yes, I believe that is their mentality right now.
Is this the end of MoviePass?
So I speculated that I think I don't think MoviePass is going to disappear, but I feel like it's going to revamp its services and probably lose a huge percentage of its subscriber base in the process. Like, you notice that they, for a long time there, were hyping up how many subscribers they had. They were releasing all these press releases saying, oh, we have 3 million people. We're hoping to hit 5 million by the end of the year. And I feel like the tide has turned on MoviePass, and I am not surprised that they haven't mentioned how many subscribers they have recently, because I feel like a lot of people are probably jumping ship already. So I'm not sure, what the internal numbers are there, and if they're dumb enough to release them to the public. But I can't imagine that things are going well inside MoviePass HQ right now.
With that surge pricing, I kept my MoviePass subscription. I kept it even though I bought AMC A-List. But today I officially canceled my MoviePass subscription. Brad, I know you're also a MoviePass subscriber. Did you already cancel it?
I canceled it, but it's active until the middle of August, so I might go use it just to really stick it to them. But here's the thing: like, MoviePass is obviously struggling right now, but I think that if their price raise and their new policies don't completely wipe out their subscriber base, they might still have a decent group of general audiences who will still keep the service, because there are a lot of people out there who aren't like us, who don't feel the need to see new releases as soon as they're out, especially when it comes to blockbusters, because some people don't like the crowds, some people just don't feel an urgent need to see it right away. I think one of the concerns I have, though, is maybe that we saw that, or at least MoviePass, bragged about how they increased attendance for lower key movies, indie movies like Lady Bird last year and stuff like that. So I wonder if they're going to limit indie releases as new releases as well, and that could be kind of detrimental to some indie projects where the first weekend or two of an indie movie's release is indicative of whether the studio decides to expand to a larger market sooner than later. So if these MoviePass subscribers, don't head over to AMC A-List or somewhere else, and they start not seeing these kinds of indie movies like they were because they had MoviePass, that could, do some harm to indie productions as well. Even Keith Calder, actually, the producer of Blindspotting, even posted on Twitter like a little joke. He was like, that face when MoviePass looks like it's going under as soon as your indie movie is opening in more theaters. So it's obviously a concern after they, created a huge user base that was going to see movies more often than they were before. I don't think that they're going to die immediately. They're definitely going to become a little less substantial and reliable, but I feel like they could almost be like this like bargain movie service where people, use it after some time has gone by if they're not seeing movies right away.
I think this is interesting because it seems like everybody like turned on MoviePass like pretty quickly, and I do want to rewind as the former official quote unquote podcast of MoviePass and say that like MoviePass was a great service. Maybe it wasn't run well. The customer service was never good. But I saw, and Brad, I think you would agree, you saw probably a lot more movies than you probably would have if you didn't have MoviePass. It's a shame that all this is coming to an end. And it's also a shame that, like, even with these restrictions, I feel like if this service had launched, 6 months ago, and they had said, it's $15 a month, you can't see a movie on opening weekend, and, I feel like we would have subscribed at that point. I feel like that would have been...
I think that's the problem, is that they promised too much too soon, didn't realize how big their business model was going to grow, and how much it was going to cost to do so. And so now all they're doing is they're pissing people off who signed up, a lot of them for a year subscription, for a service that now has lost a lot of the benefits that they wanted to take advantage of to begin with. And I think that's why, you're seeing people who are mad at MoviePass and upset about it, even though they've still, gotten good use out of the service. It's because they've been so shady and shitty about how they deal with their customers and changing their policies. Because, like, I've been using MoviePass since it was in beta, 6 years ago. And like, I even looked back and to take a look. I've seen over 330 movies with MoviePass. And taking into account how expensive it was before they dropped to $10, basically each of those tickets has cost me like $6. So that's a great deal considering most movie ticket prices are double that nowadays.
Yeah.
So everyone has gotten a benefit out of it. It's just a shame that MoviePass couldn't figure out how to run their business competently enough for us to continue enjoying it.
I hate to, keep this about MoviePass, but I'm wondering, if MoviePass does go under, do you think like services like AMC A-List are gonna just hike their prices up, from like $20 to $30 or whatever, like now that they don't have to, compete with a $10 a month subscription model? I mean, even now they're not competing. They're competing with the $15 a month subscription model. Do you think that this is going to be bad for consumers with less competition?
I don't know. I think that they could raise prices at some point, but I feel like AMC probably took the time to really figure out what they could do in order to make this work, and their subscription base is growing pretty well. I think I just saw an article today that said they have like 375,000 subscribers already or something like that. So they're going pretty well, and they're getting more out of it because those people that are going to see movies at AMC theaters, are their customers and they're getting the concession money, and that kind of thing. So it's,
I mean, that's a good thing that AMC has going for it is, first of all, they can discount the tickets. Second of all, they can track every single purchase that those people make, so they see exactly how much concessions, and they can see the return on investment that they are getting. So, but we should move on because we've got a lot more to go. But I am interested to see what happens to MoviePass. Even if they go out of business, their assets will probably be sold to a company. I would love to see someone like Fandango. Would seem like the obvious one to maybe bid for those customers and launch their own MoviePass service, but I don't know. Maybe it will just all go down in flames. We'll have to see. But let's move on to Topher Grace, who a few years ago, I'm not even sure how many years ago, 5 years ago, I ended up seeing he was playing around with editing, and he did a bunch of different cuts. He did a cut of the Star Wars prequels into one movie, and I wrote about that for the site. I'll link it in the show notes. Now he has created a 2-hour cut of The Hobbit. Brad, tell us about it.
Yeah, so Topher Grace just likes to dabble in editing. He says in a recent discussion with IndieWire that basically for him it's become a way to relax. He said there's something zen about being able to sit in an editing room and kind of cut footage together. Says he feels like he's doing woodwork in his garage when he's doing it. And part of the reason that he dug into this 2-hour edit of the Hobbit trilogy is that he had just finished playing Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke, and that was something that just kind of stressed him out and messed with his mind a little bit, and so he just really needed to unwind. And he decided to do that by cutting together this edit of The Hobbit that significantly reduces the amount of runtime it takes to tell that story. The Hobbit trilogy, in its theatrical cut form, is 462 minutes long. It's 532 minutes if you are insane and watch the extended cuts. And so Topher Grace cut a considerable amount out of that story by cutting it down to about 2 hours. He didn't really give away any details as to how he recut the story and streamlined it or anything like that, but he did say, obviously, it's a lot tighter. It doesn't sound like he's had a screening of this cut yet, like he did with the Star Wars prequel trilogy. But then again, since that was an event that was for people who were invited by Topher himself or, some of his friends, people that knew him, there's a chance that it did happen, and maybe we just didn't hear about it because one of those cool Hollywood things. But it also could just be that he worked on this, after the movie was done, and he's been busy now because he's doing the publicity circuit for Black Klansman. So maybe there's a chance that he'll have some kind of thing where he gets people together to watch the cut of the movie again.
Yeah, the problem is he doesn't own the rights for these movies, and I've talked to him about this because he, as an actor and someone who aspires to maybe direct and stuff like that, he is learning a lot from this editing process and just learning about storytelling, editing, framing, what shots you need. And I've been lucky to be invited to a couple of those events. So if he is going to have a screening of this, and if I am invited, I will write about it for the site, but it does, it's not going to be something that's released widely or even presented to the public because, no one's ever seen that Star Wars prequel film that he made outside of, just the group of his friends and a couple people like me. But yeah, let's move on to National Treasure. National Treasure 3 is something we've been talking about. This makes me feel old. We've been talking about it for over a decade. Apparently, that's how long ago Book of Shadows came out. And, I recently saw The Meg and got to talk to the director of The Meg, John Turtletub, who directed the National Treasure movies. And, of course, I had to ask him about National Treasure 3. I will put in the audio right here for you to listen. Every time I see you, I have to ask about National Treasure 3.
I know.
It's my job, I'm sorry. But...
I need you. I really do. I need you to make a lot of money in the stock market so you can go finance this film. I would make it tomorrow. Finding the right script is hard. It was brutal for the first two. It's still going to be brutal for the third. But I don't think Disney wants to make it, and I think they have other things they want to make more. But I'm telling you,
now they have a
if we
streaming
did
platform,
another one,
so they need content.
The fact is, it'll probably be made as a streaming film, which is
then they'll reboot,
great for some people and not great for others.
Yeah, they'll reboot Three Ninjas.
Dude, they'd be fools not to.
I mean, I am a fan of that first National Treasure. It's kind of a guilty pleasure. It's, Da Vinci Code meets Indiana Jones light. And, I was kind of hoping that they would complete this National Treasure trilogy, even as much as I didn't love the sequel. But it now sounds like, at least reading between the lines, him saying it will probably be made as a streaming film, to me reads as they've had discussions about that, and that also reads as like, it's probably going to be a reboot of some kind without Nicolas Cage and without him involved as director. Do
you think that's what he meant by it will be good for some people and good and maybe not good for others? Because I was wondering if he meant like, contractually, maybe financially, actors maybe get. I'm not sure about the inner workings of this, and maybe you,
yeah.
Peter, or even Brad, you might know more than me about like the inner workings of contracts and stuff. But like maybe people get more money for theatrical releases than they do for streaming. So I don't know if he's talking about like a director's fee if he were to come back but for the movie to end up on streaming or not. I don't know.
I was taking that as him meaning the audience itself is like, maybe they want to see Nick Cage return, and maybe they'll get another National Treasure movie, but maybe it's going to be more, I don't want to say akin to like the direct-to-DVD sequels that we got in like the 90s and 2000s, but I don't think Nicolas Cage would star in a direct-to-streaming movie. I don't know. The whole world is changing, right? Like, we used to consider that as like the less than format, but now Netflix TV is the more than format. It's the HBO. So maybe, with Disney, they're making big budget films for their streaming service. So maybe it would be National Treasure 3, but we don't know. But I'm wondering, you guys, really quick, are you fans of the National Treasure movies, and would you be up for a reboot on the streaming service, or do you even care for if they got Nicolas Cage back for a third film?
I'm basically the same as you, Peter. So I sort of have a small soft spot for the first movie and didn't really care that much about the sequel. I think I saw it and just instantly forgot it. So I'm always down for more Nicolas Cage because he's just I just like watching him sort of stomp through and create chaos in the world. But what about you, Brad?
Yeah, I enjoy the movies for what they are. I'm not in love with them or anything like that. I think a reboot would be, I don't know, doing a disservice to the series, just because I do think Nicolas Cage is part of what makes that series a little more fun than it otherwise might be.
But what if it is a young Nick Cage, played by Nick Cage, and they de-age him?
They got the budget.
Yeah, I'm totally down, but only if it's like a prepubescent Nick Cage, played by Nick Cage, where he's got like a higher pitched voice and everything, but he still has like the same size head and facial features.
So it's basically that Adam Sandler fake movie from Funny People.
Exactly, but with Nick Cage looking for treasure.
Okay, let's move on to the Joker movie. Apparently, we've learned some more casting for the movie, and Mark Maron, someone who has been very vocally outspoken about hating superhero movies, has been cast in this movie. What is going on here, Ben?
Yeah, so this is the latest bizarre piece of casting for this really weird Joker movie that is just called Joker, by the way. I think we talked about that last time. Joaquin Phoenix is playing the Joker. This is an origin film for the famous Batman villain. We know that Robert De Niro is in talks to play a talk show host in this film. And according to Variety, Mark Maron, who recently appeared in the Netflix series Glow, is going to be portraying a booking agent on Robert De Niro's talk show who plays a part in booking Phoenix's character and eventually causes him to go mad and become the clown prince of crime. So Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is like a failed stand-up comedian, sort of in the vein of The Killing Joke, which is a famous one-shot Batman comic that sort of depicted an origin story for the Joker. It's very famous, and we've talked about that a lot before as well. This movie seems to be taking a page from that book, as well as taking influences from darker dramas like Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy, and films of that ilk. Scorsese, of course, is executive producing this movie, and Todd Phillips is directing it. So the idea of De Niro, who starred in The King of Comedy, playing a talk show host is sort of like a weird reversal role for him. And then Mark Maron coming on board. I mean, I guess to this movie's credit, Mark Maron seems like, the sleazy, greasy guy who would be a perfect booking agent in a fake universe that they're creating here. So, I mean, I guess it's good casting. This movie's entire existence continues to baffle me, but I guess as long as they're going for it, they might as well go for it. And I enjoyed what I've seen from Maron's work on Glow. So I haven't really seen him in too much beyond that. Obviously, I mean, he was in like Almost Famous in a really small part, but
you should check out. He had a show on some network called Maron, which is loosely based on his life.
Oh yeah, it was on like IFC, I think, right?
Yeah, IFC.
Was it? Yeah, was that? Yeah, you're right. I thought it was FX, but it was IFC.
Yeah, and it was actually kind of enjoyable. It was him doing the podcast in his garage. It's worth checking out. I really like Maron's work on Glow, and this does seem like a good role for him, as weird as it sounds. Let's get to our last and final story, and for that, I guess we got to give a spoiler warning for Mission Impossible Fallout. So if you haven't seen Mission Impossible Fallout and don't want to know what didn't happen in the movie, then I guess you could turn away now, and we'll see you tomorrow. But let's start with this. So some new news came out telling us how Mission Impossible Fallout almost took Ethan down a much darker path. Brad, tell us about it.
Yeah, so in Mission Impossible Fallout, the primary plot is Ethan Hunt and his IMF team trying to track down this case of 3 plutonium cores that they lost and that are going to be used to set off 3 nuclear devices somewhere around the world. And one way that they figure out to get it back is by completing a task for the White Widow, played by Vanessa Shaw in the movie, and that task is
Vanessa Kirby.
Vanessa Kirby. My bad. And one of the task is breaking Solomon Lane, the villain from the previous movie, out of his containment as he's being transferred, much like the middle sequence in The Dark Knight. And he has to assume the identity of this villain named John Lark, who ends up being killed in the middle of a scuffle with Ethan and Henry Cavill's character and Rebecca Ferguson's character. So Tom Cruise has to assume this role. And originally, the path that they were going to take him on in the movie was going to...
By the way, even you explaining this, which is not the most convoluted part of that movie, it just seems so convoluted.
I was actually under the impression that Henry Cavill was John Lark, but maybe that was a whole different character. I don't know. I guess it really proves, because we all liked the movie a lot, that the plots for these films don't really matter that much. But,
no,
yeah.
I mean, in the end, Henry Cavill is revealed to be John Lark, but during the scene, it's assumed that John Lark is somebody else. And
okay. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So. Anyway, originally what was going to happen is, as we see in the movie, Tom Cruise has to assume the identity of John Lark and pull this heist off to get Solomon Lane out of prison in order to trade him for the plutonium. Originally, he was going to have to go a little bit deeper undercover, I guess, as this villain, and in assuming his identity, and do a little bit more darker and terrible things in order to complete this job. Christopher McQuarrie wouldn't go into any specific details as to what that means, but the reason they didn't do this is because as they clung to that idea and used that as the driving part of the story, it sounds like the movie became more of a psychological thriller than a typical Mission Impossible movie, and it also ended up being done at the expense of all the other characters not really getting a time to shine, and so the movie was just too full and too long before they were able to do all the other things that you expect from Mission Impossible movies. So they let it go and reworked things, and during the time they were reworking is when they came up with the extended action-packed England sequence in the middle of the movie. And so Christopher McQuarrie wouldn't say just how far they were going to push Ethan Hunt into that dark side, because one of the questions was asked was whether he was going to have to, if he would have to kill somebody, like an innocent bystander or something, and deal with the repercussions of that. But he didn't want to give anything away because he said that they had a scene that they cut from Rogue Nation that they ended up using in this movie, which is Solomon Lane giving that little speech to him where he says, your mission, should you choose to accept it, he's like, I wonder, did you ever choose not to? And so that was meant to be in Rogue Nation, but they cut it and used it in this movie instead. So he doesn't want to give any details of what they cut from this movie in case they decide to use it sometime in the future. But what's interesting is that you actually still kind of feel remnants of that idea, because there's that whole kind of daydream sequence where when Tom Cruise is told what he has to do in order to get the plutonium, he envisions them pulling off this heist, and he's watching all of these like law enforcement officers get killed by the White Widow's team around him, and then he's confronted with the possibility that he has to pull a gun on, a cop and basically shoot him point blank, in the face. And like that's all in his head, and like it's him worrying about it. You really get this idea of how, concerned and careful he is, and how he, his mission is always to keep people safe, and like he feels this like dedication to it, and it kind of haunts him in that way, to the point that he figures out a whole different way, to pull off that heist without anybody getting hurt.
Interesting. Very interesting. Also, I saw Mike Ryan had an interview with McQuarrie that I think McQuarrie said that Michelle Monaghan's character was originally dead in Ghost Protocol. Did you guys read about that? Yeah,
apparently. Yeah, Chris McQuarrie said something about how in the part of the work he did for that movie was that was bringing her back into the fray.
Yeah, I'm glad they did, because this was that was one of the things I loved about this movie, was how much this was kind of a conclusion for all the sequels that had led up to this. Like, it really had kind of conclusive story arcs for a lot of things from 3, 4, and 5, right? So.
Yeah, and I just want to take this opportunity to say that I think Chris McQuarrie is like a legit straight-up genius, because after reading all these interviews and hearing him talk on a bunch of different interview podcasts over the past few days since I've seen Fallout, it sounds totally crazy the way that he actually was able to piece together these Mission Impossible movies. And it does not feel, anytime we write about a movie that has started production without a script, that's always a huge red flag, right? Like the script is almost always the most important foundational element to telling a story in movie form. Like, you need a solid foundation to build everything on. But somehow McQuarrie manages to get away with not doing that in these movies, and turning out films that feel completely put together and somehow like inevitable, the way that they come together. It's really like a masterful thing, and I just encourage everyone who cares about filmmaking to try to track down a couple interviews with him where he talks about the way that he made this movie, because it's totally nuts the way that he just like shoots certain scenes and has no clue how they're going to factor in, and is able to sort of puzzle piece the whole thing together along the way, and for the movie to come out as great as it did. And same thing with Rogue Nation before it. It's really like a mind-boggling thing.
It's kind of fun, actually, because like we had heard about when Rogue Nation was happening, there were some like trouble behind the scenes where they hadn't figured out their ending yet, and they were shooting without knowing necessarily where they were going. And there was also,
and I actually think you feel that in the ending. That ending where they trap him in the thing, it's so anticlimactic.
So then also like them starting without a shooting script on this one, it almost gives it like the same vibe that the Mission Impossible story has, because there's so many times in this movie where Ethan Hunt constantly says, he's like, I'll figure it out, we'll figure it out. And it's like that's exactly what they're doing with these movies, and somehow they always figure it out.
Yeah, and really quickly, I guess this is like the one place where I can drop this little observation, because it's not big enough for an entire article, I don't think. But I think they've talked a lot about how they reworked Vanessa Kirby's character throughout the course of production. And if you guys watch closely, in the scene where Ethan Hunt first meets her, she's standing on a stage, and that's where it's revealed that she's related to Max, which, Brad, you wrote an article about that, and people can check that out.
We actually didn't write an article about that.
Oh, okay. Well, in any case, she's related to Max, who was the villain from the first movie. And if you look in the background, the people around her are like nodding their heads as if they're listening to music. And it was so clear to me that when they originally shot that sequence, they had her as like a lounge singer doing like a singing performance live right there. But in the final movie as it exists, she's giving this speech about this charity and all of this stuff. But if you look at the extras in every shot in that scene, they're all reacting as if music is happening when there really isn't any. And it's one of those things where McQuarrie, was working with the actor and found the character as the movie was going and was able to just completely change things on the fly and turn it into this incredible thing that it ended up being. But and these remnants of the early versions are still visible in the final film.
See, this is all nuts. Like, as a moviegoer that watches these films, I'm glad, I'm happy with the end result, but I can, just hearing you talk about this, and I've read some of the interviews, I'm imagining what it's like to be on that crew and also be at the studio being like, wait, we don't even know what he's chasing after, like they're like adding insert shots to explain the plot of the film.
Yeah, it seems so stressful.
Yeah. Anyways, we have reached the end of today's Slash Film Daily. Ben, where can people find more of your work online?
You can find me writing at slashfilm.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Ben Pears.
Brad, where can we find you?
I also do the writing at slashfilm.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Ethan_Anderton. And check out that stupid podcast I do called Go Flix Yourself on iTunes and some other podcasting platforms.
You can find all the stories we talked about on today's podcast on slashfilm.com. I'll link them in the show notes. You can find me at slashfilm on all social media. This podcast, Slash Film Daily, is published every weekday. You can subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And we have a bunch of emails we need to get through one of these days, and we'll get to it when we have a slower news day. Please, please, please go to iTunes, give us a 5-star review, tell us, tell everybody why you like this podcast, and spread the word. We will see you tomorrow.